Okay, and with that, let's get started. Hello, my name is Sean McGinley. I'm a customer success engineer here at Moveworks, and welcome to our Creator Studio weekly webinar. Today, we're going to be looking at a use case for configuring Salesforce contact lookups with Creator Studio. Tune in next week for SharePoint site lookups with Creator Studio. So we're going to go through this use case for setting up Salesforce contact lookups, and then we're going to have some enablement for more resources, as well as a Q&A session at the end. So let's hop into it. So first things first, we have to establish what is our use case, what system are we integrating with, and what do we want to do? So in this case, we're looking to integrate with our Salesforce instance. Within Salesforce, we have a concept of contacts. So contacts are individuals who we have contact information for. They may be partners that we have a working business relationship with, and there'll be some information associated with them, such as their email, contact phone number, the business that they work at, and the last time that we reached out to them. The first thing that we want to do is mock up what our conversation from an end user should look like when they trigger this query. So a type of question that we would expect the user to ask is, what is our contact information for a given individual, in this case, Rose Gonzalez? To retrieve information like this, we need to do a GET request to our Salesforce instance. This is what the API call will look like. We'll have our Salesforce base URL. We're going to hit this query endpoint, which allows us to submit this query parameter, this Q equals, where we can then basically write a SQL query, or for Salesforce, it's called a SOQL query. And then we can retrieve the information for the given individual and present it back to the user via Moveworks. So let's see a demo of what setting this up would look like. So first things first, we're going to need to have a Salesforce connector in our Moveworks instance. So navigating into Moveworks Creator Studio, I can go to Creator Studio connectors. I can see a list of all the connectors that currently exist, and I could set up a new one. For Salesforce in particular, we do have an authentication guide. We recommend that this is set up using an OAuth password grant flow, and setting up Salesforce can be a little complicated. You're going to need to get all this stuff so that you can generate a bearer token. We have an example configured here. So we have our Salesforce base URL. This is just a dev instance for demoing. We have our OAuth to auth config as defined here, and this is going to be a password grant flow. You're going to have to generate a client ID, a client secret, password grant username. So this will be the username for the account, and then the password grant password. You could follow this OAuth guide for how to get most of this stuff set up in Salesforce directly. Salesforce also has a bunch of OAuth setup guides as well. And then once you get those credentials generated, you can step down here to testing in Postman, validating the credentials that you've created work. And then from there, you could set up the connector with that information. Because this information, or the way that this information is queried, is a question where all that we're doing is retrieving information. We're not modifying anything. We're just getting information based on what the user's asking. We are going to configure this as a query. So I'm going to click Create here. We want to label it something descriptive. I'm going to say that this is a demo. And the purpose of this is to look up contact information from Salesforce. Allow users to query additional information from contacts within SFDC. So the connector that we have set up for this is this demo Salesforce 2 connector. And then we have our API connection. So I strongly recommend for the API connection that we use a tool like Postman. Let me pull that up. So here I have my Postman instance. Postman allows us to verify and validate API calls. So you're going to need to request an authentication token. That is going to allow you to actually access the instance via API. This is all the information that you're going to generate from Salesforce when you create the OAuth grant. And then after we have our auth token, we're going to need to construct a query that is going to retrieve the information that the end user would want when they ask this type of question. So I've already configured an example here. And when I send it, we can see that it returns information as expected. So if I replace this with another name, we'll see that this is updating in real time based on the call. So how is this URL constructed is going to be an important thing for us to understand so that if we need to configure it for a different table or with different fields, we're able to do so. So for querying information from a table in SFDC, what we're going to want to do is hit this services endpoint. We're going to be retrieving the data. This is the API version that we're currently using. And then we're going to query for some information. The syntax of this query is very similar to SQL. It's actually a superset of SQL called SOQL that Salesforce has built out. And we can write a select statement here. And then that select statement will allow us to select column names from some table. So in this case, we're interested in retrieving information from the contact table within Salesforce. So I'm going to select information that I think that users will want when they're asking questions about a contact that lives in Salesforce. So this is going to be the account ID and the account name associated with that contact. So where does this person actually work? What is the mailing address of the business or the person? Their name, their email, their phone number, and their mobile phone number, and their title and department, just so that I can get some more information. Who is this person? What role do they have at the company? How can I contact them if I need to by phone or by email? I also want to pull in the lead source and the last modified date and the last activity date. So this will let me know how did we contact this person initially? When was the last time that this information was updated? And when was the last time that we reached out to this person? The from statement is going to be from the table that we're trying to reach in Salesforce. And the where statement is going to be how we're drawing which user we should actually be pulling the information for. So this where statement is going to need to be dynamic, where based on who the user is asking for information about, we're going to need to fill this in. The reason that we have these percentage 25 inputs here is because this is URL encoding. So essentially, when you try to send a call like this out without these values, it's going to fail. Well, so actually, to be a little bit more descriptive, so the percent sign is the wildcard. So this is saying that prepending or ending Bob as a name, we want to retrieve any row in our table where the name is like Bob, such that if there's text after or before their name, we'll still retrieve them. But if we do it with just the wildcard symbol, we'll see that we get you have sent us an illegal URL or improperly formatted request. And this is because of URL encoding. So to make sure that Salesforce can decode this properly when they receive the API call, we need to include the 25. So a little gotcha for the Salesforce API there. So with the information that I have in Postman, I'm going to go back into Creator Studio, and I'm going to define my API endpoint path. So my API endpoint path is going to be everything after my base URL, which I configured in my connector. Our method is going to be get. We don't need a request body here because it's just a get call. We're not writing anything to the endpoint. And then our query parameters. So our query parameters are going to be the ending of the URL where we define some query that has some value. So our key here is just going to be Q. And then our value here is going to be this entire statement. So we should be able to test this. And we get back the response that we're expecting. So we have Bob. He works at Edge Communications, and we have his contact information here. So I want users to be able to dynamically ask for contact in Salesforce. I don't want them to always get Bob returned to them whenever this use case is triggered, right? So what we can do is dynamically get the user's query by using the syntax of a double curly brace and then the word query. So this is our smart extraction. And what this will do is when a user asks a question that triggers this workflow to look up a contact in Salesforce, we will dynamically pull the name from their question and then input it as the query value here. So going back to our example, we need to be able to pull out Rose Gonzalez from this question, and Moveworks will do that for us automatically with the syntax that we have here. So I've inserted my query value here. I want to test to confirm that it's still working as expected. So I'm going to enter Rose as a test value. And we can see that we have the information for Rose Gonzalez returned. So this is working as expected. It's pulling all the fields that I would expect it to based on the query that I've configured. The endpoint's correct. We're good to move on. Next, we're going to set up the identifier and description and do the rest of the API labeling. So the way that this will be done is we'll need to go into each field that we're going to want to pull into our Moveworks bot's understanding of what the contact object is. So we're going to have an identifier. The identifier is going to be the person's name, which will be listed here. And then we'll make the description the account name. But I want to be able to pull in all of this information. So I'm going to want the account name. I'm going to want the user's department, their email address. We'll take the last modified date, the lead source, their mailing street, their mobile phone number, and their phone number, as well as their title. None of this other information would really be relevant for an end user. They're not going to be super concerned about the type or anything like that. So we can leave this as is. Next, we can define a follow-up action. In this case, we're not going to have a follow-up. We're just going to provide them the information they're asking for. And then we're automatically going to generate some triggering and lookup keywords here. So we should always review these to make sure that they make sense. So in a case like this, what I'm really looking for is a question like, what is our contact information for Rose Gonzalez? I'm not expecting a user to just come in and ask, which department does Rose belong to? I'm expecting them to ask for contact information or additional information about a contact. When people ask for information about people who don't work within the company but work externally from the company, they tend to provide the full name. When individuals ask questions about users within the company, they tend to only provide a first name, at least initially. So for these examples, I'm going to enumerate it with a full name just to make it more clear. So what is our contact information? What account is... So this is a pretty valid one. It was Rose's information last modified. Okay, perfect. And now I'm going to launch this. Since we're just testing it, I'm only going to launch it to myself so that I can validate that it works as expected. So now that we have that saved, I'm going to allow it a minute to propagate. So the propagation here could take up to 5 minutes. So always make sure that you give it some time after you create your use case. If you start testing it immediately, it'll be hard to debug because you might start assuming that there is an issue where there may not actually be one. It's just still getting set up in the background. While I'm waiting for that, let's talk about how to learn more. We have a Creator Studio developer certification. So on our Moveworks Academy site, we have guided training modules that cover key concepts and learning objectives. We have step-by-step videos detailing the key use cases of Creator Studio. And after going through that course, you can take a multiple choice exam that will give you a certification and a badge for your LinkedIn if you'd like to display your admin knowledge of Creator Studio. We also have documentation and a developer community. So the developer community allows you to ask questions to other admins and tool owners who are using Creator Studio, inquire about solutions that they've implemented, see any interesting workarounds that they presented. You can also talk to the product team and other engineers at Moveworks, such as myself, to get some help as needed. We have some additional user-friendly tutorials and guides, and we have more developer-oriented documentation. So now I'm going to check on what we've configured. Okay, and then looking at this, so we can see what is our contact information for Rose Gonzalez. Pulls up that the contact information for Rose Gonzalez at Edge Communications, so that's that account name, includes the following details: their email address, office phone number, mobile phone, etc. And then I can ask more specific information that we also pulled from that request, right? So when did we last update the contact? Last update to the contact information was June 18th, 2024. What is her role at Edge? We pulled in that title and department information. we're able to get, she holds the position of SVP of procurement at Edge Communications. I also asked, can you help me write an email to reach out to her to reestablish contact, right? So this is that co-pilot behavior in action. So it drafts me a basic email. It includes some specific information about her, so that she's the SVP of procurement at Edge Communication, that we're interested in her insight. And then it goes to list my contact information. And I just ask it to fill that in for me, which it then does. Okay. And lastly, I would like to open it up for Q&A. All right. If there's no questions, we can end the session here. I would encourage you to join Moveworks community. Here you can watch all the recordings for the past webinars and you can see what's upcoming. So these are all the recordings from the previous ones, and you could sign up for the upcoming ones here as well. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.